to Kai. The following is a fan-written story set 62 years before the events of Star Wars: A New Hope, and 36 years before the events of Cassius, Jedi Apprentice. The following story is non-canon to any and all events in the Star Wars series. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. A tremor in the Force. Far from the core worlds of the galaxy, an ancient threat stirs from 1,000 years of slumber. Long ago, on a world long forgotten to the known galaxy, the Jedi Knights fought against a powerful threat that would see all worlds subjugated and enslaved. The dark Jedi Shvak, though powerful and feared, was defeated by the Jedi and imprisoned in stasis by the pacifist Order of Tessara. With this mighty foe seemingly vanquished, the Jedi left the Order of Tessara in peace, promising to leave them to deal with their own affairs. Now, on their homeworld of Sunai, the Order of Tessara gathers in anticipation not only to welcome the first Jedi to visit their planet in centuries, but also to welcome the birth of their newest member. Chapter 1. Sunai's gleaming morning sun had just begun to crest over the distant rocky landscape. Its crisp night air would soon give way to the arid heat of the rocky dunes. Silhouetted against the faint red glow of the distant star, a line of quiet men and women in flowing white robes walked, single file, step by step, bearing gifts of precious metals, fine garments, and rare delicacies wrapped carefully upon the backs of beasts that plodded along beside them. Ever they strode, speaking nothing as they approached the Temple of Tessara, an ancient structure situated at the top of a tall hill. With the rising of the sun, its white stone features sparkled and glistened as rays of warm golden light were cast upon it. As they walked up the hill, one of the elderly men in the group trailed back, his strength waning from the climb. From behind, a hand was placed on his back by another, a man dressed in dark wine-red robes. His face was obscured by his hood, but there was no malice in his movement, as he aided the old man step by step to rejoin the others as they approached the gates of iron and bronze that opened before them. Approaching them was a man with thinning hair, his attire the same white flowing garments worn by the others. Stepping to the leader of the group, he held out his hands and took hold of his shoulders.
"You got an early start. Excellent."
The man removed his white hood. His long graying hair hung neatly behind his head as he smiled.
"Rothera, my warmest greetings, old friend."
Rothera signaled to the others as they parted and set off in different directions within the temple to make preparations, leaving only these two men and the red-cloaked stranger.
"Sivka, this is the one you told me about?"
Sivka nodded and gestured to the man behind him, who stepped forward and bowed in respect.
"Indeed. Not often is it that one of his kind graces our lands, Rothera. Allow me to introduce Master Donwe of the Jedi Order."
Donwe removed his hood and smiled kindly. His skin was a shade of pale blue, and his hair black with strands of gray at the sides. Most peculiar were his eyes, piercing green in color, and twinkling within the light of the torches on the walls. He spoke.
"My sincerest gratitude for the warm welcome. Master Jedi, I do hope your time on Sunai thus far has been favorable."
Donwe stepped forward, his eyes fixed upon the exquisitely carved decor.
"Indeed it has been. I must say, when the Jedi Council assigned me to this position, I was rather surprised."
He carefully caressed a stone carving of an ancient beast from the planet's folklore.
"No Jedi has set foot on Sunaian soil in nearly 6 centuries. I'm honored to be the first in so long."
Rothera bowed in respect.
"The Order of Tessara welcomes you, friend. Should you require any assistance, please do not hesitate to ask."
Donwe looked to Rothera and returned the bow.
"The ceremony you will be celebrating. Tell me more. I've become quite enamored with the fascinating customs of your people." "I will leave that to Sivka. He is our chief historian, after all. If you'll excuse me, I'm needed in the sanctuary hall. I shall retrieve you when it is time to convene."
As Rothera departed, Sivka walked alongside the Jedi Master down a long hallway. Extravagant paintings lined the walls, depicting the history of Sunai and its people. Donwe took notice of it all as his mind raced. His love of history was no secret to the Jedi. As a Padawan, he spent much of his time within the archives, studying all he could about galactic history. Sivka looked to him with a smile.
It's quite remarkable, no? Here you can see the earliest members of our order. They would wake early every morning, paying reverence to the rising of the suns. Our ancestors believed them to be siblings, 2 brothers, one red, one yellow. The red sun, they believed, sought destruction and chaos, while the yellow sun sought peace and tranquility. They believed that their reverence pleased the brothers and kept them from turning their anger towards each other, and by extension, Sunai. How fascinating, remarked Donwe.
As Sivka regaled Donwe with the history of Sunai, the Jedi's eyes soon caught sight of a most peculiar painting. A monstrous silhouette clad in armor, surrounded by white-robed beings, and 2 more figures wielding lightsabers. Donwe looked carefully at the painting.
Tell me about this one.
Sivka's gaze grew slightly dour.
This painting depicts the greatest threat that ever befell Sunai. Shvak, the Conqueror. Shvak. 1,000 years ago, in the waning days of the Old Republic, the galaxy was besieged by a man, a creature who sought to conquer all worlds within our galaxy. Shvak was a dark force wielder of the Jedi species. His lust for power was trumped only by his insatiable lust for bloodshed and battle. Numerous worlds fell before his might, and the might of his army.
Donwe carefully examined the painting.
Shvak. I've never seen such a name mentioned within the archives. To be truthful, many believe the tale of Shvak to be a myth. I wouldn't know for certain myself. What became of him?
Sivka gestured to the painting.
According to the tale, Shvak's army was defeated in the Expanse region. Yet even this was not enough to stop him. He came to Sunai to lay waste to the Order of T'Sara. 2 Jedi tracked him to the planet. The battle was said to have raged on for days. Finally, Shvak's arrogance became his undoing. As the Jedi subdued him, the Order of T'Sara were able to imprison him in stasis, bringing his reign of evil to an end.
Donwe looked to Sivka.
What became of him? The Jedi wished to execute him while they had the opportunity. The Order of T'Sara, however, are pacifists. With the threat of Shvak dealt with, they saw no need to kill him. The Jedi tried to convince them that Shvak was too dangerous to be left alive. Tensions rose, and eventually the Jedi left Sunai, washing their hands of any responsibility that would come should Shvak escape. Since then, no Jedi has set foot on our world. Until today, that is. You said Shvak was imprisoned in stasis. Where?
Sivka shrugged his shoulders.
I couldn't tell you. Many of our records from those days have been lost to time. If he did indeed exist, it's likely he was sent off-world into the unknown regions, far from where he could do anyone any more harm.
Donwe looked with a slight concern at the painting as Sivka patted his shoulder.
I wouldn't put too much credence in this matter, Master Jedi. Most of us believe it only a legend after all. Come now. We should make ready.
Donwe nodded and followed Sivka from the hall.
I am told that this is a tradition practiced for a millennia. Indeed. Within our order, life is sacred. How better to rejoice in such virtue than by welcoming new life? This ceremony is to welcome a child? Not just to welcome a child, to welcome a new bright flame within the Force. Just as we hold ceremonies for those who pass on, so do we hold ceremonies for those taking their first steps into the journey of life. Come, we will be starting soon.
Sivka gestured to a tall staircase as Donwe accompanied them. When they reached the top of the steps, they stood before large doors crafted from ancient wood. Using the Force, Shvak held out his hand as the doors opened. Before them was a wide-open courtyard, situated atop the temple. Members of the Order of Tessara were already gathering, clad in robes of white and sashes of blue over their shoulders. Donwe took a seat at the back and watched as the hushed murmurs of the crowd became silent. Rothera soon stepped to the top of the steps overlooking the crowd. Gesturing from off to the side, he was soon joined by a slender man with a shaved head, wearing a garment of teal, and a woman with flowing white hair and eyes of blue, clad in a gown of pale yellow. In her arms, she held a bundle of cloth that wiggled and squirmed. Rothera smiled to the two of them and turned to the crowd.
Friends, family, travelers from near and afar. Today is a most special day, not only for the Order of Tessara, but also our beloved brother and sister Tyra and Savre. Today, we celebrate the birth of our newest member and a new, beautiful soul of the Force itself. Savre, if I may.
Donwe watched from the back as the woman smiled, her eyes full of joy as she gently handed the bundle over to Rothera. As he removed the cloth, he could make out the face of an infant. The child cooed and cried softly, looking around with confusion as Rothera held her, his back to the rising of the morning sunlight.
How is she to be named?
Savre spoke up.
Her name is Kukuri.
Rothera looked kindly upon the face of the young child who reached to tug on his nose.
Kukuri of the House of Takai, today you begin your new life. Rest assured that where you walk, we walk beside you. Where you find hardship and suffering, we too will be there to share in your grief. In happiness, in sorrow, in chaos and in harmony, we are your brothers and your sisters, and by the will of the Force, we shall see you nurtured in our ways. As surely as the suns rise to welcome you, so too do we all. Welcome, Kukuri Takai. Welcome.
The radiant golden light shone and cast its glow across the hilltop as Rothera held Kukuri to face the Order of Tessara, who knelt and bowed in reverence, chanting in a tongue that Donwe was unfamiliar with. As he looked upon the infant, laughing and looking at all the funny-dressed people saying funny words, Donwe felt something. He knew all too well this feeling. This child was strong with the Force. It wasn't long, however, before he sensed something else. As Rothera handed Kukuri back to her mother, Donwe leapt to his feet as an object flew past the parents and down the steps to the center of the gathering place. A thermal detonator.
Get down!
Donwe quickly grabbed hold of the nearby members with the Force and pulled them back towards him as the bomb detonated, sending shrapnel and broken stone all around, along with several of the Order who were not fast enough to escape. Donwe drew his lightsaber and saw an approaching speeder.
Everyone get back!
The Order quickly ran for cover as a few of the Order, garbed in silver armor and white capes, came forth from the shadows, wielding long wooden staffs. Rothera stood in a daze as the speeder landed outside. Out jumped a group of desert raiders wielding blasters, clad in tattered brown shawls and ponchos. Immediately, they began to open fire upon the Order. Donwe sprang into action as he deflected the blaster fire. Rothera quickly ran to Savre, who was knocked to the floor in the chaos, a wound on her head causing a blotch of red blood to soak into her white hair. In her arms, Kukuri cried in fear. Rothera helped her to the side as Tyra stood and ran to join the Tessaran Guardians, grabbing a staff and taking positions as they ran to aid Donwe, who pulled the blasters from the hands of the bandits, slicing them to pieces. It wasn't long, however, before two more speeders arrived, carrying more bandits who stormed forward as the Tessaran Guardians used their staffs with expert precision and downed a few of them. The rest of the Order continued to run inside as blaster fire rained down upon the sanctuary. Tyra held off two of the bandits as Donwe aided the others. As he looked to the side, however, he saw his wife in Rothera's arms, her eyes glazed over, as she clung on for life.
Savre!
His wife would be the last thing he saw as a blaster bolt tore through his heart, bringing him to the floor as Rothra yelled out in horror. Donwe looked to the fallen man and back to the bandits as he threw his saber outwards, cutting down a few more of the bandits and sending another flying off the hilltop with a mighty push. The Guardians were now circling the remaining bandits as Donwe held his blade out.
Put away your weapons.
Rather than oblige, the bandits each removed detonators of their own and activated them. Donwe's eyes widened as he called upon the force and grabbed all 4 of the bandits with great effort and threw them back as they collided with the speeders, which exploded in a shower of fire and metal. Donwe shielded himself behind one of the cracked stone pillars as the Guardians were brought to their knees from the force of the explosion. When the dust settled, Donwe ran to the Guardians and helped them to stand if they were able.
Keep a lookout. There could be more.
Donwe ran to the body of Tyra, feeling his neck for a pulse, but there was none. As he shut his eyes in sorrow, he could hear the crying of an infant and saw Kukuri cradled in Rothra's arms, reaching down at her fallen mother. Donwe stood slowly and walked to Rothra.
Is the child all right?
Rothra shuddered and nodded his head.
Dead. Both dead. Focus, friend. Who were those people? Dune Striders. Bandits. They've never done something like this before. We are not safe. None of us are safe.
Donwe looked to Kukuri, still shedding tears of fear and sorrow. Slowly he approached and put his hand over her forehead, gently brushing his thumb across her face as she stopped crying and immediately fell into a deep sleep. Rothra looked in shock.
What did you do? Be still. She's merely asleep. She shouldn't be seeing this. Rothra, do your people have a hideout? Anywhere safe to go?
Rothra thought and gently bounced Kukuri.
Rothra, speak.
Rothra looked at the Jedi.
We have an old stronghold in the Western Hills. It's a long journey. We will need time to prepare. You may not have time. Gather what preparations you can, and gather the others. Tell them that you need to make for the stronghold immediately.
Rothra looked to Kukuri.
The child. She is not a week old. With no mother. No father. She will not survive the journey.
Donwe looked at the helpless child and back to Rothra.
Then give her to me. What? To you? I can take her to Coruscant. I will see that she is cared for. You wish to train her as a Jedi? If the Force wills it. Regardless, she will not be safe here.
Rothra looked at Donwe as he held out his arms.
It was not by accident that I am here, friend. The Force deemed it so. Would you deny the will of the Force?
Rothra stayed silent for a moment, before slowly handing over the sleeping child to the Jedi Master, who used his robes to swaddle her and keep her safe.
Please, one day, let her return to us. Bring her home.
Donwe nodded.
She will see Sunai again. I swear.
Rothra looked out into the distance. He could make out the early stages of a sandstorm.
You must go. Now. I will inform the others.
Donwe bowed and quickly left the sanctuary and fled down the steps and out of the temple. Before the hour had passed, he had reached the village where he had left his ship. Opening the hatch, he sat in the cockpit, strapping in and holding the sleeping Kukuri on his lap as he took off into the sky. By day's end, Donwe arrived back on Coruscant, landing his ship inside the temple hangar. Waiting for him there was Master Elan, his tall frame towering over the service droids that rolled on by. On either side of his large, elongated head, 2 sets of strong antlers. With his hand, he scratched his muzzle and walked over as Donwe stepped out.
My friend, I received your transmission. You were not scheduled to return for another 2 days. What happened?
Donwe stepped by him at a brisk pace, holding the child.
I'll explain everything later. We must speak to the council immediately.
Master Elan looked at the bundle in Donwe's arms as they walked to the turbolift.
A child? Donwe, what is happening?
Donwe sighed deeply and looked up at the eyes of his lifelong friend.
Something terrible happened on Sunai. I need to check on the child. Gather the High Council. I'll be there momentarily.
Elan nodded as the turbolift door closed, and Donwe took the infant to his quarters. Setting her down, he put his hand on her forehead. She would wake up soon. His heart raced as his mind ran 1,000,000 miles a minute. Washing his face in the sink, he returned and saw the child just beginning to open her eyes. He looked at her as their eyes met. Picking her up, he held her head gently.
Everything is going to be all right, little one. Don't fret. Through this darkness, there is still a silver lining.
The girl smiled a bit as Donwe wrapped her in a warm blanket and made his way through the halls of the temple and up to the High Council chamber. There, Master Elan was speaking to Master Oparan Sissus and Master Jocasta Nu. All the while, Master Yoda stared out the window at the setting sun as it crested the horizon. Sensing Donwe's arrival, they all turned to him.
Masters, if I may.
Elan walked to Donwe and put a hand on his shoulder.
The other members are currently attending to matters of importance.
Not to worry. I recognize it's short notice. Sit, please.
Elan walked to his large chair and sat.
Masters, I regret to inform you that on my visit to Sunai, the Order of Tassara and their temple were attacked by wasteland raiders.
Jocasta Nu looked with concern to Master Rancisis as Donwe continued.
With my help, the Order of Tassara were able to fend off the attackers. I'm afraid, however, that several lives were lost. That is why I have brought this child.
Donwe held the child in his arms as her eyes focused on the strange people she had never seen before.
What happened to the child's parents?
Donwe's face grew pale and somber.
They're dead. Killed in the attack. The Tassarans are making their journey to their sanctuary. The child, however, was deemed not strong enough to survive the journey. With their blessing, I have brought her here.
Yoda's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he stroked his chin. Elan spoke up.
You have brought her here for sanctuary?
Donwe's gaze did not break from Master Yoda's.
I have brought her here to be trained.
Jocasta tilted her head.
Trained? On whose authority?
This girl is strong with the Force, Master Nu. Without a family or people, this is her best chance for a new life.
And what of the Tassarans?
Master Rancisis responded.
They have agreed to this?
Donwe nodded.
Yes. The head of their order has agreed. He wishes only that she return to Sunai one day to see them.
Elan spoke up.
The circumstances surrounding this matter seem strange.
With all respect, Master, had I not been there, this child would have been lost as well.
So sure of this you are?
Donwe looked to Master Yoda.
Difficult to see the future is, even for the wisest of Jedi. Certain are you that the child should be here?
If not here, then where?
With her own kind. A path not lightly taken is the way of the Jedi. A path few of the Order of Tassara would allow their own to walk.
I promised Rothera that I would keep this girl safe. She must be trained, Master. You must see it.
Elan spoke again.
If I may, Master Yoda, regardless of why she is here, the little one is here now, before us. If her own kind have given their blessing, then perhaps she should be trained.
Master Elan, you said yourself that the circumstances behind this matter are rather strange. I'm not sure this is something we should be so quick to decide.
Master Rancisis looked from Jocasta to the baby.
What better time than the present? I suggest we take a few minutes to discuss this matter. Donwe,
If you would step outside for a moment.
Donwe nodded and stepped outside of the council chamber, looking at his reflection in the glass window. A pit formed in his stomach as he shook his head. Looking down, he saw Kukuri looking up at him, her bright blue eyes locked upon his. Smiling softly, Donwe held out his finger as she gently grabbed hold of it, before slowly drifting back to sleep. Elan soon exited the chamber and gestured for him to return. As he walked in, he stepped back into the center of the room, where Yoda stood.
We have reached a decision. Trained, the child will be.
Donwe bowed his head in reverence and turned to Master Jocasta.
Master Nu, I am entrusting this child's care to you and the other caretakers. Keep her safe. I will visit when I can and oversee her growth. When the time comes, if it pleases the council, I wish to train her myself.
Yoda looked to Master Elan, who nodded.
Discuss this matter we will at a later date. For now, return to your duties.
Donwe nodded and carefully handed the sleeping child to Master Nu, who gently cradled her.
What is her name?
Donwe's gaze stayed locked on the baby girl.
Kukuri. Kukuri Takai.